Hello. Join me on a wonderful day-long trip down the Mattawa River in the steppes of the explorers and fur traders that built our country. If you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching. In the spring of 2022, I took a day trip to Samuel de Champlain Provincial Park to do some hiking, and I found the trails very rugged and very arduous, but it was seemed like a really interesting park. And of course, given the path of the explorers through this region, something that had a historical connotation to it that was different than many parks, which are primarily natural based. I decided that I wanted to go back for a more extended trip. So in the end of August 2022, I went there for 5 days with the RV, hiking and canoeing each day. The canoe trip that I had looked on the map was a chance to paddle the Mattawa River from a put-in as far upstream as I could reasonably go, given that I was traveling alone, and then considering also going downstream all the way to Mattawa town proper. However, the upstream part was the first part that interested me the most. It was clear from the map with the rapids and waterfalls and the flow, it would probably be easier to go downstream. So I decided to drive 10 kilometers with my vehicle with the canoe on it, park at a picnic area, and get in at Pimsi Lake, paddle up to the Talon Chute, and then back and down the river all the way to the campsite park area, and then portage a kilometer or so back to my RV with the canoe and everything, store the canoe at the RV, have something to eat, and then walk the 10 kilometers down the highway back to my car and drive back to the campsite. So it was a long day, but what a wonderful day it was. And when I got in there, I didn't realize the improvements that the park had made with these signs and plaques at each of the campsite, each of the portages. Now, unfortunately, for whatever reason, they haven't kept them up, and a lot of these signs and plaques are canted in different directions. 2 or 3 of the plaques are missing, probably been stolen by people, I'm guessing. However, it's pretty cool, and it's really too bad that they don't spend a couple of dollars to bring this back to where it was. One of the neatest things I found was when you get to a portage that, let's say, is 110 meters or something, they call it 110 paces, and it's pretty fun. Another thing that was really neat about the plaques and the names of the portages is it was extracted from the records from the explorers themselves. And so I found the real sense of history. Clearly the forest I'm walking through is not the forest that was there when they were there, but you still sense it. And so it was pretty special. Now, just in my little bit of note-taking here over this route, either going one way or the other, and probably many times in some cases, the first record of a European traveler in this direction was Etienne Brulé in 1610, followed by Samuel de Champlain in 1615. And let's understand why this matters. So you come to North America as a European, used to the use of machinery and wanting to transport goods in the sense of a trading economy, something that was, at the scale of it at least, was different than what the natives had done. And again, if we look at the explorers, if you will, from Europe that came to these different countries, different places in the world, from the standpoint of the explorers, they're expanding their empire or their situation, which of course has happened since humans were invented 4 million years ago, whatever. If you read history, it's just one conquest and one war after another. So this is, unfortunately, in a way, a continuation of the same. So if you're a native North American, this is an invasion, and a subjugation, and in many cases an extermination of your people. So it can't be well remembered, and I understand that. However, it's what happened, and so this history, and of course, and I think we should point out also that the native history for the 10,000 years or whatever, there was no written language, so it's a much more difficult history to trace in any kind of detail like we can do with the European history, which has writing and dates and so forth. Now, this is no excuse. It's just how it's been done. Anyhow, so the records I have here briefly, and of course, when you go up the Ottawa River, then you take what they call the Little River, the Mattawa, upstream, and then some portages. You get to Lake Nipissing, and you can continue on with some trouble through the French River all the way to Georgian Bay and beyond. So it was a very important route and pathway for the Europeans as they began to establish their way in North America. And so I have here in 1610, I have Etienne Brulé, who's the first recorded European to travel up the Mattawa. 5 years later, Champlain came along. And then in 1620, we have Nicolette, and 1626, the famous French missionary Brebeuf. L'Allemand in 1648, Rodesson and Grossier on their way further west, of course, in 1658. La Vondrier, also explorer in the western part of Ontario, in 1731. So you can see there's big gaps here because there just wasn't that many of them. And then, of course, in 1759, the French were defeated at the Plains of Abraham, and a lot of the administration of North America, at least the Canadian part of it, switched to the British. And you can see after that we have British explorers, Alexander Mackenzie in 1794 and David Thompson in 1812. And so the phase kind of starts off with the initial explorers, just what's here. And you have this enormous trees, an enormous amount of wildlife and so forth that, of course, the natives have lived in harmony with for, since the Ice Age. And the Europeans see it as something to exploit. And so within 100 years, plus or minus, you have, well, since, by 1900, the wildlife has been decimated. The trees are gone. I mean, for a native people, it must have been just a holocaust in many ways. However, in 1970, the Ontario government decided to establish Samuel D. Champlain Provincial Park and the Mattawa River Provincial Park, and those help preserve this chunk of history with its, controversial aspects. But of course, it's not so much controversial as it is what happened, and unfortunately people who got wronged and people who took advantage of it. There are features that, especially in the rock, that are still visible. And one of the interesting ones which we'll cover on this is something called Hell's Gate. It's an opening in the rock. We think the best recollection I've been able to read is that it was an ochre mine for the natives, and some animal took residence in this. My guess might be a wolverine. So when explorers came near the hole, they heard a real growling, terrible sound coming out of there, and most of them stayed clear of it. So it's kind of funny. But anyhow, from my own standpoint, the scenery was beautiful, the history was remarkable, and that led to a really terrific day. And here then is my video of my trip down the Mattawa. Well, good morning. So I'm here at Pimsi Lake, Pimsi picnic site. This is a small lake here, and this is where I'm starting my canoe trip. So what I propose to do is go around that corner to the Talon Chute and see the waterfall, and then the rest of the dam and the gorge. And then I'm going to head around, oops, there we go, around that corner, and that'll take me along the Mattawa River back to the park. And then later I'll walk back along the road, pick up my car. So it's a beautiful day. Looking forward to this. This is Pimsi Lake then. Been going about 10-15 minutes, just a bit out into the lake. And then the Talon Chute is up that way. This is where I'm headed right now. Then I'll come back and go over there, sort of, where the river continues south. Now this is real fur trading country here. The Mattawa route up through Lake Nipissing and Georgian Bay and all the way, amazingly, all the way to Lake Winnipeg. Whatever you may think of fur trading, but it was one of the first things that began to build this country from a modern standpoint. I'm sure if you were First Nations, you saw it as the destruction of it, and that's a fair discussion. But nevertheless, this is historic here for the times and the situation. So I'm quite enjoying it today, and it's the way to explore it, of course, is in a canoe. This is quite a wonderful place here. And remember, it's not just the scenery, it's the history. Champlain was here on these very rocks. Radisson, Groseilliers, Jean Talon, Chute, and so many nameless other fur traders, loggers, and other people who were here at the beginning of what became Canada from the European perspective. You can see that the rocks here in some places are polished because of the footsteps. And while we have modern explorers, I'm sure most of this was done in the day when there was many people traveling these rivers. So it's pretty neat to stand here and soak up the history along with the beautiful landscape. Now there's no way to be completely sure if, let's get into the shadows here, if this was the historical route, but it sure mustn't have been far away from it. You can see behind me to my shoulder, that's part of the portage. It's pretty steep, but the rocks are at least sharp, so you get some traction versus round smooth rocks that are harder to grip on. But still, carrying, you know, canoe and weight and stuff, that's a good day. Amazing. What a place. So now I've paddled across Pimsi Lake And we're now headed well, north, but ultimately east on the Mattawa River. So there's the river going into a rapid, and over here is the portage. There is a sign just camouflaged, and it looks like a plaque. There was one missing at the Talon Chute, so maybe they moved it. We'll have a look. So this is the first of the portages I plan to be taking today. I think I've got 7, but maybe it's more, I forget. Whatever, I've got about 12 or 13 kilometers to go back to the mouth of the Horserace Rapids at the Champlain Park, upon which I will continue to try portage back to the campsite. But again, the history here, as the plaque reads, natives used these portages for centuries, the Europeans for another 200 years, and now of course us modern recreational travelers. But pretty amazing, and I don't know, I just feel the history here compared to other places I've been. So that's the portage to portages. Apparently these are poles they used to push the canoes up the rapid. I don't think you'd be getting a canoe up that rapid, but maybe in higher water or something. And it's just this little lake here, and there's where those trees are here in the center is a bit of a cove, and we go to the right of that, and there's another water feature there, so things come fairly quick. Beautiful day. This is the second rapid that I had to portage around, and it's just basically, now we're back to kind of a river, and we'll put in here, and you can see there's a swift over there, but we should be able to get by it and around the corner and see what comes next. So the original explorers called this the Cave Rapids because of the trees and how dark it was in there. Now obviously that was 200, 300 years ago, and it's different trees now, but they saw this kind of as a gloomy, like a cave is French for cellar, for basement. And that's what they saw in this feature. I'm at the discharge end of it now, north of the just portage and had lunch. I just came around to the bottom just to have a look. So this is the entrance to the meadow portage where I'm at here. It's kind of tricky. You've got a pretty good swift going here. The current looks like about 30 centimeters per second, and it's probably at least that, if not a bit more. And you gotta be attention that you come in on the high side here and get it beached, because if you miss it somehow, it goes pretty good down there, and it'd be quite a thing to get out of there without jumping out of the boat or something. Now there's no waterfall right away, but it'd be inconvenient. So this is something you just gotta be ready for. And it's easy to mistake this for a breeze and think there's nothing to it when there's a fair bit to it actually. And this is called the portage à la prairie, which translates to meadow portage. I hope so, for once. It'd be nice if there's no rocks there. And we'll go the easy way around the sign. So I just finished the portage de la prairie. It's not much of a prairie in there. I would say it's pretty much the same as everything else. I think we have to remember though that when these folks named some of these, it was 200 or more years ago, and almost all of the vegetation here has changed. There well could have been a flood or something that washed away a bit of this land here, making it more open and grassier when 200 odd years ago. You can see the hill behind me getting much closer now, and the Mattawa River runs kind of into that after the Parizeau Falls coming up here. and it'll turn sharply east. We've now been heading north up to after we left Pimsi Lake. So now my progress is comparatively slow, and I'm sure if I was a voyager they'd fire me, but I've been taking pictures and whatever that is, and enjoying the day. Just beautiful weather. It's about maybe 18-20 degrees and low humidity, so really quite a pleasure to be out here. It's pretty amazing. Here I am on this historic Canadian river, the Mattawa, and you can hear the canoe strokes of the folks from the past, and there's no one here but me. There's no motorboats, not even other canoeists or kayakers or anything. Far enough from the road, no planes are flying over. It could be 1750, and other than my modern equipment, you wouldn't know. It's truly amazing. So it's just, you can see behind me too, is a real, this certainly you can see why these things were used as highways. They're just so convenient, and especially moving heavier things like a whole canoe full of furs, you know, compared to carrying that on your back or something. There's just no comparison in effectiveness. So it's a pretty special experience here today. So this is the last portage on the river before I head back to the RV, theoretically. And this is just really tough. The landing here is pretty good. This is the east end of it, so but I'm going to give you a run back on this trail as I go back to get my pack, and it's really something here. Okay, here we go. So remember, this is a trail, and you're supposed to be able to carry your canoe and pack and what have you over it. I've been a lot of places, and Temagami has a lot of rocks which are more sharp, I think, but from the standpoint of just rocks on trail beds, especially big ones, I've never really seen it like this before. And this is true on the hiking trails too. It's sort of the way it is here. So you figure you're carrying a canoe, which, unless it's carbon fiber, is going to weigh 60. And then you've got, if you have a pack, if it's day stuff, it's not so bad, but if it's a canoe trip, you're going to be carrying 40 or 50 on top of it. So it's 140 meters, and there really isn't anything easy here, except the eastern landing is a bit better, but this western one is also big rocks and very hard to get out of the canoe, especially with the wind today. Thankfully the wind's behind me, which is just wonderful, and I've never really had it behind me for such a long period of time like this, so it's been true pleasure that way. But coming up to this, I was afraid that you try to get out and the wind grabs the canoe, and so I figured it out, but it was tricky. And once again, just this trail here, and I mean, forget modern people who are doing it for the hell of it. Imagine, you know, fur traders carrying these huge packs of furs on their back and going over this stuff. I mean, I don't know what was here 200 years ago, but these rocks haven't moved, I don't think. So that must have been quite a story. hopefully the camera's showing the trail bed. I say that in jest, of course, but so these campers here across the bay there are the first people I've seen all day. I've had the whole park situation to myself. So this put in here is pretty tough because the water is 4 feet deep right there, so you can't ground it very easily. And figured it out, but it was tricky, and that's where it came from. And so here comes, that's the end of the paddle today. My total travel is just a little over 18 kilometers, and this last 2 or 3K, if that even, after the last portage has been really tough. A lot of rocks in the river, a lot of shallow water, some more scratches on the canoe, but we got through it, and now we get beached and portage back to the RV, and then go get the car. What a day, fantastic.
This trip was run out of Samuel D. Champlain Provincial Park. This park is located approximately 60 kilometers east of the North Bay City in Ontario, and approximately 10 kilometers west of the small village of Mattawa. North Bay is approximately 300 kilometers north of the large city of Toronto. On this map of my trip, site 1 there is where the RV was parked, where my campsite was. So I took the Jeep with the canoe on it and drove out of the park, and then along the highway number 17 to the picnic area located at Pimsi Lake at site item number 2 on the map. I parked the Jeep there. You can park there all day, but it has to be out of there by 10 p.m. So that was going to be okay. And I put my canoe in the water there and began my trip. And the first trip was up to the Talon Chute. And in addition to the chutes themselves, it's a very beautiful chasm, canyon kind of thing that you paddle through. Probably the steepest walls that you'll see during the day. But the Talon Chute is well worth the time, and I'm really quite pleased how this day progressed. So anyhow, when you finish the Talon Chute, you come back out and you proceed north on the Mattawa River through the number of different portages I identified in the video, culminating at the turn with item 4, the Parizeau Falls. So very impressive and certainly worth half an hour of your time. I then proceeded due east on the Mattawa. There was some small portages, there was some swifts, there was some few places I had low water. Again, this is late August, so that's probably not a huge surprise. But I was able to manage it okay, and ultimately I got back to the Horserace Rapids, and item 5 were at the takeout. And then I portaged my canoe and gear on the park routes about a kilometer or so from number 5 back to number 1. After refreshing myself, then I was able to get moving from number 1 and walked all the way back to number 2 to get my car, and then back to the campsite for what was truly a wonderful day. Again, it would help me grow my channel if you would consider subscribing to Hiking with Henry and telling my others about my channel. Thank you very much.